Late September 2012, the University of Port Harcourt sat beneath a sky swollen with rain that had not yet fallen. It was a kind of afternoon that felt ordinary. Students crossing campus, laughter echoing between concrete buildings, the humid air thick with the promise of something unnamed. 4 young men stood outside the weathered hostel. Tizzy, quiet, thoughtful. Big L, bold, protective, always the first to speak. Tarmono, calm and diplomatic. And Chai Boy, the dreamer among them. They were final year students. They were young. They were ambitious. And on that afternoon, they set out for the nearby community of Aloo to recover a small debt owed to one of them. A simple errand, a short conversation. None of them knew that the road they traveled would be the last they would ever walk. Aloo felt different that evening. Too quiet, the kind of quiet that carries weight. A group of young men stood near a roadside kiosk, whispering. Their eyes followed the visitors with the steady attention that outsiders always attract in tight-knit communities. Big L approached the debtor's residence with confidence. Words were exchanged. The discussion about money grew tense, voices rising, and then, from somewhere in the gathering crowd, someone shouted a single word, "Ole! Thief! Thief!" The word spread like gasoline meeting flame. Crowds formed quickly in places where suspicion already lives beneath the surface. A woman screamed from across the street. A man grabbed a stick. Within minutes, the 4 students were surrounded. They tried to explain. They showed their phones. They mentioned the university, but panic is louder than reason. Someone claimed that laptops had been stolen in the area days earlier. Someone else lied about seeing a weapon. The mob's energy shifted from curiosity to accusation to fury in a matter of moments. A young boy threw the first stone. It struck Tamuno's shoulder, and that was all it took. Shouts intensified. Phones began recording. Voices demanded instant justice, as if justice could be delivered by a crowd. In the confusion, Tizzy tried to call for help. No signal. Big L stepped forward, shielding his friends. "Let's talk," he shouted. But words drowned in chaos, and chaos had already taken hold. Rain finally began to fall, heavy, relentless. The downpour turned the ground to mud, but the fury did not cool. The 4 friends were dragged toward an open field. Thunder cracked across the sky. Tamuno screamed that they were students of the University of Port Harcourt. A few faces in the crowd hesitated, but hesitation loses against momentum, and the momentum that evening was merciless. What followed should never have happened, and then there was silence. Only the sound of rainfall remained. Smoke curled slowly into the night sky. The crowd dispersed, some shaking, some defiant, some already searching for ways to justify what they had done. They believed the matter was finished. It was only beginning. By morning, the videos had spread across the country. Social media ignited with outrage. Television stations interrupted their programming. Nigeria stared at its own reflection and recoiled. In Port Harcourt, families wept behind closed doors. University campuses fell silent with grief. Students marched in protest. Candlelight vigils filled the night with trembling light. Hundreds of small flames held up against a vast darkness. The tragedy forced an entire nation into a painful conversation about mob justice, about fear, about rumor, and about the failure of the systems meant to protect its citizens. Authorities arrived. Arrests were made. Community leaders denied responsibility. Some participants claimed they had been misled. Others insisted the boys were criminals. Truth struggled to rise above narrative. Courtrooms filled, trials stretched on, justice moved slowly, but it moved. Years later, the events inspired the film Dark October, a haunting dramatization that forced audiences to confront uncomfortable questions. How does a rumor become a death sentence? How does fear overpower humanity? How quickly can ordinary people become something unrecognizable? There was one boy in the crowd that night who had thrown no stones. He had said nothing. He had simply watched. Years later, he became a lawyer. Every case of wrongful accusation reminded him of that stormy evening. Every time he stood before a judge, he remembered the 4 young men who had tried to speak but were never heard. He dedicated his life to due process because sometimes change is born from regret. The Aloo 4 tragedy was not merely a single act of violence. It was a mirror reflecting fear without verification, justice without trial, and anger without accountability. It revealed how fragile order becomes when rumor replaces evidence, and how quickly a community can become the very danger it believes it is fighting. And it left a question hanging in the humid Nigerian air, one that still demands an answer. If the crowd had paused, if someone had insisted on proof, if one brave voice had stood firm, would 4 futures still be alive today? 4 young men left campus that day, believing in tomorrow. Tomorrow disagreed. The tragedy of Aloo was not just about violence. It was about impatience, about fear disguised as bravery, about certainty without evidence, and perhaps the most terrifying truth of all. The crowd was not made of monsters. It was made of ordinary people, which means it could happen again.